Welcome to our summarized version of the Building Healthy Digital Habits Together presentation. We had a great opportunity to meet with parents and caregivers across the district at our 4 zonal sessions. Our goal of the presentation was to support parents and caregivers to start a dialogue and communicate with their children at home around healthy digital habits. As well, we wanted to provide tips and strategies to give guidance for parents on how to deal with the current digital environment that we find ourselves in and our children in. We want to acknowledge and thank the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, on whose traditional territories we teach, learn, and live. So thank you, families, for watching. A key part of many of the ideas in this presentation have to do with connecting with our children and having healthy discussions about what's going on in their lives. I took a quote from an interview I heard from the radio from Dr. Cara Borson-Bovan, who works at Media Smarts, regarding the relationships we need to build with our children. She said, "We need to break open this conversation and make it part of our regular, everyday parenting. It's important to have an open dialogue and trust around developing rules and ground rules for using technology. Research shows that when young people know they have trusted adults in their lives that they can go to, they will go to them." My name is Lucky Sani. I'm the District Principal of Education Technology here in the Burnaby School District. My role in the district is to support schools, staff, and students to integrate and implement the tools of technology to empower them and develop skills that support learning. As digital tools have become powerful ways to communicate, share content, and connect over the internet, we need to now not only teach about the skills of using technology, but the importance and responsibility around it. As well, it has a tremendous impact on our well-being, and many of these things have come to the forefront with our use of things like online games and social media.
Hello, my name is Nick Christofides, and I'm a Director of Instruction with the Burnaby School District. Spent a lot of time in the area of safe and caring schools, which is mental health, safety, and promoting health and wellness. This area historically didn't intersect with my colleague Lucky Sini's work in technology, but in the last 10 years or so, it very much has. Good decision making as a young person, being a responsible citizen, looking after your mental health and wellness does involve looking at how we're interacting and how we're using technology.
This year, we launched our district-wide digital literacy and citizenship initiative, aligning it with our key education technology plan goals. Students from K to 12 will receive instruction that's tailored to their age group. We're focusing on 4 main areas: digital identity and relationships, privacy and security, mental health and wellness, and media literacy. Each grade will cover these modules throughout the year. Our goal is then to scaffold these activities across all the grades, ensuring a continuity and reinforcement from kindergarten to grade 12. This approach ensures that if students miss something or they're not really engaged with some material one year, they'll have multiple opportunities to grasp the concept in multiple and subsequent years. Over time, students will gain more relatable and comprehensive information, helping them make more informed decisions in these key areas.
You'll notice the branding similar to the initiatives that Lucky would have mentioned on the previous slides. These resources on physical health, sleep hygiene, managing stress, screen time, tech time, etc., can be found in elementary and secondary schools, often used by classroom teachers and counselors. And really, it's recognition of our work over the last 10 years or so on providing education on these topics, as they are very much part of how students stay well and spend their time.
In this presentation, we'll explore various factors that influence healthy habits that we aim to instill in our children regarding digital technology. We won't be diving too deeply into each aspect, but rather highlighting some key points. First, we'll discuss the importance of planning and guidance at home. This includes creating media plans and setting household guidelines on how we manage and use technology. We'll also cover good sleep hygiene, screen time, social media exposure, and online video games. Additionally, we'll examine specific tools such as gaming tools and the chat platform Discord. Finally, we'll look at how children engage and connect with each other online and the nature of their online relationships. When developing guidelines, rules, tips, and strategies for our children's digital habits, it's crucial that we align these with our core values and beliefs. We can reinforce these values through our behavior, how we handle different situations, and the guidance that we provide. For instance, consider how you establish rules and guidance for safety in everyday situations. When children play on the playground, or when they travel on public transit, cross the street, or manage things on their own, we set these rules based on our core values, and these values are supported by our beliefs. The same values and beliefs should apply to both non-digital and digital spaces. So it's important that we ensure that our digital guidelines connect with those values and beliefs as well. When we regularly reinforce these values through our actions and our guiding principles, they help maintain consistency and clarity for our children. So when Nick and I were looking to develop this presentation, we were trying to think of a way that we could, relate some of the ways that we used to kind of make strategies and parent in the past to what it kind of looks like now in the current environment, especially including digital environments. So how were things different before as compared to now, and how did we make decisions as parents when it came to other situations when we were looking at the resulting independence of our children doing more activities or certain things in other areas or environments? So we use this idea or a metaphor of using this idea of barriers, boundaries, and gates. Now, when we're looking at barriers, we're looking at things that are usually non-negotiable. We're saying, no, this is a restriction. It's something you're not allowed to do. And that barrier is put there for a number of reasons. It might be done for risk or safety reasons. Hey, we don't do this activity or we don't do this yet. There's danger involved in it or you're not ready for it. And that could include maybe a maturity or age appropriateness to it. It also could include that maybe the training and skill is not there just yet, or the maturity is not there to be able to handle that ability or skill. So we put up a wall and we say this is a barrier or something we definitely don't do. A boundary looks at allowing certain things to happen, allowing the ability to do certain things, but there's clearly some limitations that have been set. A boundary. We don't cross that boundary. In many cases, as we're learning, as any child is in terms of their environment, they may come close to that boundary, but it's going to be a lot to do with how they handle that responsibility, their maturity, how they handle those responsibilities are ways in which we can measure if a child is ready for another responsibility or a different responsibility, or those boundaries can be shifted. And again, we look at aspects around age appropriateness. We'll, again, measure things by risk and safety, knowing that if someone has the requisite knowledge and skill, they've demonstrated maturity, that they can handle the boundary that's been set for them. And the final one is gates, which kind of looks or alludes to boundaries and or barriers. In some cases, to do or allow that activity or that opportunity, it requires permission each time. So the gate is there so that you're not able to do it, or you have to have the required permission before you're allowed to. And of course, they may include things like time limits, like you can do it, you have to ask permission, but it's in this set amount of time. And again, matching maturity, responsibility, and sometimes it's age appropriateness, where some students are at. There's been some notion that due to COVID, age maturity and age appropriateness may have been shifted a little bit. But again, these are things that we make as decisions as parents on our own children, depending on where we believe they're at and our comfort and level in the values that we have with regards to things like risk or safety or privacy, etc.
I'd like to address the topic of parenting and drawing a parallel with some of the decisions that we need to make as parents and teachers, which for many years there was sort of built-in decisions that parents had to make, for instance, in and around when a child is expected home, when they're free to walk home on their own, when they're allowed to use transit, maybe when they would get their driver's license or go to a party for school, when they could be home alone, when they could sleep over. And these, often when in my work as a counselor, when I would talk to parents, it seemed like they would have landed on what was appropriate in terms of a timeline for those things. Sometimes when you have the discussion about tech time, how much, where it's consumed, whether when a child would receive their own cell phone, when they're using their cell phone or iPad or computer in their room without supervision, it's a little less obvious what the rules might be from family to family. And I'd like for you to think about whether use of those devices, even though a child is home and in your house safely and not out on a Saturday night or not out when it gets dark, there is still some decisions to be made in that parenting in the last decade and for sure going forward involves, I think, some planning around what that looks like and what's safe. And having an understanding and a curiosity about whether it's going well. And so those discussions, if they haven't been had already, are probably necessary. And, the school district won't dictate what those lines are. They never have. But I think it's important to have a common understanding of what might be safe and what isn't. Just like those examples I gave historically about being out, it's the same thing is true with phone and device use. The consumption of technology isn't new. Our generation did spend time in front of a TV. I don't know if it's as much time. I think devices offer a lot more now. And I think one of the key reasons for that is that television was vetted in just how it was delivered. We knew as parents what was on Saturday morning. Saturday morning cartoons probably were appropriate for kids to be watching. And we knew that as the shows moved into the evening and certain hours, there might be different content. As we look at consumption of media now, there's more of it. There aren't barriers and gates in and around when certain types of programming are shown. So I think as families, we need to look at sort of streaming consumption, and again, having some idea of what's being consumed and when and what's appropriate, and having that discussion about how that's going to get monitored and how students can be part of planning how much consumption, when, and what type of TV or streaming or video games, etc. So just even that awareness, understanding that we also consumed technology, but there was some built-in barriers and gates. And now there needs to be a little more interest in how the consumption of media is happening within our households.
So now that we have that information or the framework of how we make or handle parenting decisions, let's apply it to a question. Let's say, is my child ready for a phone? And again, these are questions you want to ask yourselves, starting to look at maybe your child needs a phone, they're going to be walking from here to school, and you feel like it makes you more comfortable, it's safer that if they have the ability to potentially communicate with you when they're heading there or they've arrived. So you have to make some considerations. So based on these kind of requirements, where's your child at? Um, maybe from past experience, you looked at maybe their maturity in handling their tech time before they kind of get overconsumed. You may decide to choose a more of a flip phone style or a texting style for the first year, or at least for the beginning, to get them started. And so they can still do the basics. They can text you and let you know that they've arrived. They can call you if they need to, but they're not ready to handle the responsibility of potentially a smartphone that would give them a little more powerful access to other things, including distracting elements, media, etc. So when you look at this kind of list, you look at maturity, you look at maybe what responsibility and knowledge they need to have prior to using it. You look at examples and where they've showed or demonstrated responsibility, and then you have to consider what are the boundaries or limitations I'm going to provide that potentially are going to um, uh, develop my sense of understanding where my child's at. And again, so we're aligning these, and we try to align these probably in all our decisions around the use of technology. So a key part of getting the dialogue going is to be interested and curious in what our kids are doing, and that means we need to get involved. And we can't just use our lack or inability of knowing certain technologies or whether it's games or platforms as an excuse to say, hey, this is going to be too confusing for me. I think the key part here is just to be curious. We don't need to be experts. We just need to be kind of in tune with our kids, saying, hey, why is this so much fun to play this? Or why is it so much, why are you spending so much time on this? Or who are you playing with? So that interest in what they're doing, in many cases, opens up a dialogue for them to communicate. Yeah, I'm doing this, or I'm using this to understand this, or it's fun doing this game because of this reason. And that's a great way for them to know that you care, that you're interested in what they're doing, as well as you to understand if something that's going on there is making them feel a certain way, happy, fun, joy, or making them feel like upset, anxious, etc. Those are key ways to get some feedback from your children. So connecting back to this idea of boundaries and gates, we do need to set limits. And that's really key important for kids when they're especially using digital devices, to see where they're going to balance their time. And that could be done in a variety of ways, whether there's a list of priority of things that they should be doing before they get an opportunity to use technology, or they recognize that this is a choice that they're making for their free time. If they want to do this, it's going to be this much time, and that's what they get to do. And then after that, it's put away and something else happens. In this case, you're looking to see where that balance is, and it's up to you to think of what's appropriate and not appropriate based on, again, your values and beliefs and the time that they're using it and for the purpose they're using it. So these are opportunities where they can tell you, hey, this is why I'm doing it, this is what I'm doing, and this is how long I'm going to do it. And that could be something that you might hear from them when they're doing their homework, or if they are using it for their free time, what are they doing on the device with that free time as well. Now, there are monitoring tools out there that let you kind of have some control over what your child does on their phone, whether it limits the apps on them, lets you narrow down maybe the time they can use it as well. And some on the Apple side of it is Apple Family Sharing, and one on the Android side is Google Family Link. As well, if you're a TELUS customer, there's home appliance apps that manage the home appliance that you have, whether it's your router, and then you can monitor from that end as well. But the key aspect of these apps, which again are very useful if you're managing, especially on the early stages of getting kids access to a phone, uh, great in terms of managing. But we want to make sure that alongside that we're also having the dialogue and conversation of why, and the kind of gates and boundaries that you're placing in front of your children with these different monitoring tools. So there's trust that you're building rather than just this idea that you're simply a monitoring and they're in their minds, maybe they're trying to avoid that monitoring if they can. So it's really making sure that there's mentoring alongside it. We know that a way that kids could evade some of those aspects of your controls is, in this case, there's tools out there um, that can actually circumvent or hide some of the applications that we're using. So Calculator plus plus, for example, it looks like it's going to be a calculator tool, but in the end, behind it is all the hidden applications. So simply you're using the calculator and then eventually it reveals all the applications on the phone that your parents or someone else can't see. So again, mentoring is just as important as monitoring, but we just need to understand it's a balance there.
I think it's very important to consider how we ourselves are modeling tech time, what we're doing in and around the dinner table, what we do with our phone in and around bedtime. But also, even understanding that historically there was a lot of problem solving, and even without realizing it, explaining to the young people in our homes what we're up to. We might get on the phone and talk to some family and problem solve about scheduling over the weekend or a family issue, and that would be all verbalized on the phone. Now we're doing that same problem solving, and we're doing that by texting a lot of the time. And so taking a moment to realize that maybe verbalizing what you're texting and what you're working on rather than it's me in my own little world texting might help role model that we're not just on our phone, just consuming media, but rather we are using our phone in an effective way, and we're keeping our children in the loop as to what we're doing. And as a result, having some dialogue and interaction with them, even though we're using the power of the device and the ability to text, etc. I think putting down your phone and giving complete attention when you are having a conversation is an important reminder. I don't think that's a detail or advice that people don't know. I just think it's an important reminder. And I think reviewing our own screen time when we're using our phone, what's effective, whether it's healthy with our children is a good idea because it shows that we are thinking and reflecting on how we're using the technology and whether the habits that we have are also healthy.
So on the kind of overview of guidance for families, um, Common Sense Media is a wonderful resource, and the next 5 slides kind of go through some of the things you might want to consider. So we won't go comprehensively into each slide, but at the end of our presentation, you'll see where all these resources are you can take a look at. So first and foremost, when you're a key aspect of creating a family plan is looking at how you're going to set up your guidance and rules around it, where you're going to set those limits, and again, partly, of course, is setting some modeling for yourself as well. Second part is looking at if you are going to be using technology, what's kind of content that everyone's using, and ideally, if it can be the highest educational content, especially more beneficial, whether that's screen time on a TV, on a tablet, laptop, etc., on a phone. You're looking at engaging material at the age group you're at, but as much as you can, higher quality educational content. The third they looked at is the ability to kind of be together. I know sometimes this gets more and more challenging, whether it's programming on um, television that your child wants you to watch with them. You don't have the time, but it's really being involved, and as much as you can show interest in what they're doing, take a look at it, and make sure there's conversations around things that they're watching. Um, all those have really good positive effects. When looking at balance, like I said, this can look different for different families for sure. But again, the overall kind of guidance is doing a number of different things away from tech, partially with tech, or when it is with tech, maybe something that's very specific for time and time in limited or time engaged. Um, a key part of this is kind of figuring out how our kids are feeling as well, and maybe even recognizing how they feel whether they've used too much or they need to do something different, whether it's on their eyes, their sleep patterns, and maybe even just their anxiety or frustration with certain things. And one of the most challenging things sometimes is acting as a key role model, whether we use technology for work and we feel like we're on it all the time, or the same kind of reasons we want downtime using passive media or television. So we have to. It takes some work here to lead by example, and that means setting boundaries for yourself alongside with your family. And I think those are key aspects um, to see where that balance. And even when you do break one of your rules or have to meet that challenge where you have to do work and use technology, is to be explicit, talk about it, say, I've probably done way too much on tech this week. I'm going to take some time off. I think it's good for me to get away from it. I think that conversation is just as important.
We know that screen time and screen use is up. That is both in our consumption of media, what was TV, but also in our work. But the screen time, which has really ballooned, is this sort of downtime, the moments where we're just scrolling and revisiting what's on our device. And I think it's, those algorithms and the ability for our device and some of the social media to bring us back to our screen is some of the time where it can get away from us a little bit, and it's way more screen time than we realized. Nonetheless, just an understanding of that and having the discussion about when we are going to be explicit about getting on a device and doing some things, and when we are not going to do that is an important conversation amongst families.
A great way to connect with this notion of screen time is watching this video from YouTube, a TED Talk by Dina Ambrosi. And he talks about the time that we have remaining in general, from an 18-year-old's perspective, the time they have remaining left in months. And they use these little circles to represent it. And the research is showing, based on that, the data, current data that's going on, that of the remaining time that you have for your own free time versus all the other things you naturally have to do, like sleep, eat, do your work, eat, etc., is around 334 months. And of that 334 months, it's almost 93% of that time will be spent on a screen, which is really quite dramatically shocking, especially when it's visualized this way. And so it's a great way to have a conversation started with your kids to talk about it and see, their thoughts around it, and their kind of the world conditions that they're in versus when we were in. We were maybe watching TV quite a bit as well, maybe not to the extent that every day when there's a subtle moment, we can go to our phone and quickly flick and look through, our emails or chat sessions or our social media that maybe not existed before. So it's such a great way to get kids thinking about it and knowing where maybe they're using it too much and having them involved in that understanding as well. Now we know that social media is playing a huge role in terms of getting us connected, and the screen time and the use by our children and their impacts on their mental health. And we wonder why. And a part of this is naturally a tool that was originally built and designed for commercial purposes, business purpose, which uses its customers as a way to produce advertising. And so that business marketing model is a key aspect of the algorithms that they build, so that it keeps you scrolling on their tool. And if you're scrolling on their app or their tool, most likely you'll get more eyes on their advertising, and that's how they make their revenue. So that algorithm, or in fact, it's an AI or an artificial intelligence structure to figure out what you like and how do you keep the same things that you like in front of you so you're continuing scrolling. people say that was our first foray into our battle with AI, and people feel like we've lost. We've lost that first battle because we are now have more kids, more adults even using technology in a way of scrolling through these social media apps in the time they consume. So apart from just that notion of that, okay, these tools are meant to kind of keep us locked in, what is the information that's being presented to us all the time? So we're in an information and content age, and you can imagine with the advent of all these tools, they can record audio, video, and people can make money from them. So they're posting tons of content that we're scrolling and accessing. And as we quickly go through all this content, we're probably being exposed to things that we probably wouldn't have been accessing, whether it's just simply on searches on the internet or page by page, web page site viewing, and of course on TV or any of the older media as well. So what is that content that we're looking at or your children are looking at? Does it have over-sexualized content? Does it have um, uh, misleading information, things that are presented to you without too much fact behind it? So these are key things you'd love to have a dialogue with your kid about and kids about, and kind of talk about what are they consuming, what are they seeing, what are the things that they find funny, or what are the things that their groups of friends who are on it are looking at. It gets them to think that all that information that's coming to them is not being vetted or filtered in a lot of respects. And so that means that they're going to be responsible for filtering it partly themselves. When we're looking at online video games, the key of playing video games has been around for a while. With the advent of online games, of course, chat becomes the key. That means you're engaging socially with your friends. They used to be sitting right next to you. Now, I remember even in the arcade, you'd be with your friends, and that'd be a key social connection. Um, and now that arcade is now online, so you can be playing with your friends or actually strangers across the world and also communicating with them. And so really is to understand what that communication looks like. And in many cases with its, your friends and friend base, it's a solid way to keep a social connection. But when you are playing with a large group and a variety of people that are strangers, if you look at those chat sessions, some of the language could be inappropriate or can be leading to type of behaviors you wouldn't want to see your children be involved in. And really getting a sense of that, just making sure you do get involved and see if they are getting upset or the type of language you're hearing from them is maybe coming or being attributed from these chat sessions. So a strategy could be, being involved with your kids, having games played only in the family room rather than laptops within rooms, and kind of just keep connecting with your kids around how they're feeling around the games that they're playing. So what are the dangers of chat? Well, when you're on online environments, and of course the people that you're meeting with are strangers, um, some of them, of course, their purpose there has nothing to do with gaming. They're looking at either making connections with your child or trying to look at opportunities where they could lead to extortion or other ways in which they're having access to your child's private information. So that opportunity for luring and grooming come from environments where, in many cases, these aren't regulated in games that do have sandbox structures where games can be designed within the environment. Kids may be playing games where the rules and things that are built into that game give the advantage to the person who's developed it. So key is to look and make sure that you do talk to your child about the information that they're providing, the people that they're connecting with, and the type of maybe kind of the subtle hints where people are kind of in the mode of luring. And remember, the sole purpose, much like the algorithms in these games, they're designed. And the people that are interested in luring and grooming are doing it for that sole purpose. They're experts at it, experts in the psychological aspects of certain things. I always take the analogy that, sometimes I'm well prepared to go into a car dealership and negotiate and do, make sure I don't fall into the traps. And even though I have all that in behind me, I go into the car dealership and I still make those same mistakes where they lead me into something, and I feel like I can't get out of it. Um, and I make that same mistake. And I look at it in the same way where when someone knows exactly what they're doing in these games and these or in a chat session, it's easy to fall in those traps even if you know what's happening. So it's always good to reinforce it, know that kids can come back and talk to you, have a conversation with you if they feel like they're in trouble or they feel uncomfortable. It's okay, and not to be overcritical, but just open that dialogue so they can come back and have a conversation with you if they feel something is wrong. So when we're looking at a specific chat tool like Discord, which is very popular, and again, from a gamer's perspective for sure, but for business purposes, it's heavily used for educational purposes. A great place to gather and share information, meet, communicate, whether it's on audio, video, chat, you're using GIFs, memes, conversation threads, special rooms. Discord has it all. So inherently as a tool, the tool isn't bad, but you can consider you've created a pretty powerful place to have this kind of conversation and your children are in those worlds, then again comes back to those actors or people that are in the environments that are probably don't have the best interest of your children and putting them in risky situations. So as these servers can be created by anyone, students even can create their own servers and invite people into those servers. Um, there is no age verification when you're signing up and using Discord. And again, when you're joining these groups, the content in there is not always filtered or appropriate and doesn't have any, unless the moderators there is kind of looking and reviewing it. But apart from that, some of that information or content that's coming through is by no means filtered. So part of this is to be curious and looking what your kids are doing on Discord. And if they go through it with you and they're talking about, oh yeah, we chat with our friends and we play games. Um, and again, you're looking at the content that's going through the chats and making sure that they understand that they're lumped in with all those other groups that are talking that way, that that's representative of them as well. That's something you can consider having a chat with. The second thing you want to look at is things like privacy and again reiterating back on what are they willing to share and not share and make sure that they keep their personal information private. And especially when someone is looking at that opportunity of luring, are they trying to lure you to have a private chat with them or reveal more than you're comfortable revealing? And in many cases, like I said, it can be subtle and not obvious. It's important for them to recognize that, wait a second, this person or the person I'm chatting with is asking more than I feel comfortable with. And again, to come to an adult is, or someone they trust can help them support them with difficult decisions they're making online.
I think it's important to point out that teenagers in particular have always been our most sleep deprived population. I think phones have accentuated the ability for kids to stay stimulated in and around when they're supposed to be sleeping. It's very important for brain health, for brain development, for the neuroplasticity in the brain, for young people to have somewhere between 10 and 12 hours sleep. That's not debated in any way. Our work with sleep hygiene started over a decade ago when we realized that perhaps students were arriving and phones and the consumption of some of the ways media that entertained them late into the night was getting in the way of learning, mood, and mental health. As you can see, the CDC states that kids need somewhere between 9 and 12 hours of sleep. That is very much the same type of research that's come out of Children's Hospital and some of the education and the work that we've done with doctors out of BC Children's. Um, 70% approximately of kids take their phones into their bedroom at night. That is not aligning with good sleep hygiene. Um, the recommendation is that everyone put their phone away about an hour before bedtime and get away from that sort of light and stimulation before bedtime and really get ready for that deep sleep that young people, that all people, but young people in particular, need to recover and have that healthy brain development. And 36% of young people are awakened by phones buzzing in the middle of the night, so they don't have that deep uninterrupted sleep. And so you can see the sort of screen time is affecting sleep in a population that already was not sleeping as much as we had hoped. It will take a conscious effort between parents and their kids to make bedrooms a device-free zone, which is the recommendation. We know what blue light does in terms of stimulating the brain and not allowing for deep sleep, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep bedrooms screen-free. And I don't think unless there's an overt plan that parent and kids are involved in making that can happen to allow for proper growth and development. On this slide, I've provided some recommendations about how you might consider limiting screens in and around the time of sleep and taking some steps towards better sleep hygiene. We know that turning off the Wi-Fi might not be realistic for many families. I think we're more interested in families having a discussion about why. It's probably the better solution long term in terms of giving young people some say in the decision and an understanding of their health and what they should be doing for their own health and wellness rather than blocking their ability. Obviously, they need some boundaries, but I think a mix of both those two is probably going to be better for limiting tech time or using tech at the right time, if we state it that way. Historically, our interest in our children's relationships at school and how they're interacting and how they're doing socially um, was obvious in that if there was healthy friendships, we had a sense of who those healthy friendships were with. And sometimes when they weren't going well, we, through cues and discussion and just being curious enough, we had a sense of how those friendships were doing. Online relationships are very much part of how kids are staying connected socially, and the research shows it as being normal and an area where as parents we need to be as interested. How are our kids doing with their online chats, their online play, and the way that they're interacting with the use of technology? On this slide, I think just stating that the connections that students have online and together are normal. More often than not, they're fun, whether they're video games or chats, and hopefully positive. But I do believe that usually positive. And I think as a parent, you need to be curious about those relationships and how kids are doing, and find a way to have the same conversations you would have with friendships, and remain supportive in good problem solving. And I think really that curiosity about how are they doing after interacting online. If it's not positive and they are not doing well and they're feeling like, whether it's hurt or sad or something like that, we need to be as interested in those relationships as we are in what were friendships in the real world. And I think that curiosity is key with online relationships as well. And it's ultimately why we need to begin some of these conversations about friendships, both off and online, and have an understanding of what it is, a curiosity about what it is the young people in our lives are doing online and how it's making them feel.
On behalf of the Burnaby School District, Nick and I would like to thank you for watching. This has been a shortened summary version of our district presentations around our zones, talking with parents. In many cases, if you have more questions or you wanted more detail, if you look over there, the link over there in our edtech plan.burnabyschools.ca/parents-caregivers link, you'll find a lot of the resources that we talked about today. As well as above here, you'll see all the resources that we used and access some of the information from our Safer Schools Together, from our government sites, Common Sense Media, getcybersafe.ca, and TellusWise. And of course, there's tons of resources out there. The key for, I think, families is to don't get overwhelmed by the resources. Start with communication at home. Start with the media plan, how you manage technology and time, and start connecting those things to what you believe in, because all families are dealing with this slightly different. They all have different environments in which they have to manage, whether it's work or home or school. All these things are challenging at best. The key is to have a dialogue and get that started with families, with your kids, getting connected to what you believe in, based on the information you have. And the more you know, the more kind of changes you can make, and make some considerations. So again, thank you for watching, and have a good night.